Captain Li Wu-jin was drinking his morning coffee when the alarm started screaming across the orbital defense station, Seoul's Pride. He had been watching Earth turn slowly below him, the blue and white marble that held 8 billion souls, when something impossible appeared on the edge of the solar system. The object was massive, bigger than anything humans had ever built, and it was moving toward Earth with purpose that made his blood run cold. The ship looked like someone had taken a mountain and taught it how to fly. Its surface was dark metal, mixed with what looked like living tissue, pulsing with lights that hurt to look at directly. Li Wu-jin had spent 20 years in space, had seen asteroids and comets and all manner of space debris, but this thing made him feel like a child, seeing thunder for the first time. Down on Earth, Ambassador Kang So-ra was pulled from her sleep by an emergency call from the Korean Space Agency. She was Earth's chief xenobiologist, the person governments called when they needed to think about life that might exist beyond their world. For 15 years she had studied the possibility of alien contact, had written papers and given lectures about what humanity should do if the day ever came. Now that day was here, and all her theories felt useless in the face of the impossible ship approaching their world. The alien vessel slowed as it reached the outer planets, moving with a grace that defied everything humans knew about physics. It passed Jupiter like the giant planet was nothing more than a roadside marker, continued past Mars without pausing, and finally came to rest in the space between Earth and the Moon. The ship was so large that it blocked out part of the sun, casting shadows across continents. Governments around the world went into emergency sessions. Military leaders scrambled fighters and prepared weapons that seemed laughably small compared to the visitor. Scientists pointed every telescope and radio dish at the ship, trying to understand what they were dealing with. Regular people stood in streets and parks looking up at the sky where something impossible had changed their universe forever. Li Wu-jin received orders to prepare a welcoming committee. The idea seemed absurd to him, like trying to shake hands with a hurricane, but he followed his training. Within 6 hours, a small fleet of human ships had assembled near the alien vessel, led by a diplomatic shuttle carrying Ambassador Kang So-ra and her team of scientists and translators. The alien ship responded by opening what looked like a flower made of metal and light. From inside came a smaller craft that still dwarfed the human ships around it. The smaller ship was beautiful in a way that made humans feel sick, with curves and angles that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the human eye could process. It docked with the diplomatic shuttle using technology that worked without any apparent connection between the ships. Kang So-ra stepped aboard the alien craft, with her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. The interior was like walking inside a living creature that had been decorated by a machine. The walls breathed slowly, and lights moved through them like blood through veins. The air tasted of ozone and something sweet that reminded her of flowers, blooming in a graveyard. She was led through corridors that seemed to change size and shape as she walked through them, until she reached a chamber that might have been a throne room or an operating theater. In the center stood something that hurt to look at directly. It was tall and thin, made of what looked like living crystal that shifted between colors that had no names. When it spoke, the words appeared directly in her mind rather than coming through her ears. The being called itself Nexus Prime, and it spoke for something called the Galactic Survival Council. It told her that humanity had been watched for a very long time, that their species had developed a reputation among the stars. Humans, it explained, were known for surviving in places where other life forms died, for refusing to give up even when facing impossible odds, for turning hostile environments into homes through sheer stubborn determination. This reputation had reached the highest levels of galactic civilization, and now humanity was being offered what Nexus Prime called an honor. 12 worlds had been chosen to compete for the title of Ultimate Deathworld, the planet whose inhabitants could survive anything the galaxy could throw at them. The winning species would be granted membership in the Galactic Council and access to technologies that would advance their civilization by thousands of years. Kang So-ra listened with growing horror as Nexus Prime explained the terms. Each competing world would send 10,000 of their best survivors to represent their species. These representatives would face trials on planets so hostile that even the galaxy's toughest species barely survived them. The trials would test every aspect of survival: physical endurance, mental strength, adaptability, and the will to live when death seemed certain. The other competing species were described in terms that made humanity sound almost peaceful by comparison. There were the Therian Collective, hive-minded beings who could survive in the vacuum of space. The mechanical ascendants had replaced their organic bodies with machines that could function in any environment. The Void Hunters were predators that fed on the life force of other species. Each competitor represented the ultimate evolution of survival on their respective worlds. When Kang So-Ra asked what would happen if humanity refused to participate, Nexus Prime's crystalline form shifted to a darker color. The being explained that species who refused the honor of competition were considered too weak to exist in a galaxy full of stronger life forms. Such species were typically relocated to more suitable environments, which was a polite way of saying they were removed from their home worlds and placed in areas where they could not threaten stronger civilizations. The choice was not really a choice at all. Humanity could compete for a place among the galactic powers, or they could be swept aside as an obstacle to stronger species. Nexus Prime gave them 6 months to prepare their representatives and make their decision. Though the being made it clear that refusal was not really an option any reasonable species would consider. The alien ship departed as suddenly as it had arrived, leaving behind only a small communication device and the promise that they would return in 6 months for humanity's answer. Kang So-Ra returned to Earth carrying the weight of her species' future, knowing that everything was about to change forever. Down on the surface, Dr. Park Min-ho was one of the first scientists to review the recordings of the encounter. He was Earth's leading expert on extreme environment survival, the person governments consulted when they needed to know how humans could live in places that wanted to kill them. As he studied the aliens' words and the descriptions of the trial worlds, he felt a cold certainty growing in his chest. This was not an honor or an opportunity. This was a trap designed to look like a gift. The galaxy wanted to test humanity's legendary survival abilities, but Park Min-ho suspected the real purpose was to remove the strongest members of dangerous species under the guise of competition. Win or lose, humanity would be weakened by the loss of their best people, making them easier to control or eliminate. But as he looked up at the night sky, now forever changed by the knowledge that they were not alone, Park Min-ho also knew that humanity had no choice but to play the game. The question was not whether they would compete, but whether they would survive what they were about to face among the stars. 6 months passed like a fever dream for humanity. Every government on Earth worked together for the first time in human history, united by the simple need to survive what was coming. General Kim Jae-sung found himself in charge of the largest recruitment operation ever attempted, tasked with finding 10,000 people who could represent their species among the stars and possibly return alive. The selection process began immediately after the alien encounter. Every military base, research station, and survival training facility on Earth became a testing ground. Scientists worked around the clock to create simulations of the hostile environments described by Nexus Prime, though they knew their tests were probably nothing compared to what awaited the chosen representatives in space. Kim Jae-sung had spent his career preparing for wars between human nations, but now he was selecting soldiers for a battle against planets themselves. The criteria were unlike anything in military history. Physical strength mattered, but not as much as the ability to adapt quickly to changing conditions. Intelligence was important, but creativity and the refusal to give up were more valuable than raw intellectual power. The chosen came from every corner of human civilization. Dr. Han Yuri was selected after her rescue from an Antarctic research station that had been buried under ice for 3 months. She had kept herself and 2 colleagues alive by eating algae she grew under artificial lights powered by a hand-cranked generator, and by performing surgery on herself when appendicitis nearly killed her in the endless polar night. Sergeant Cho De-hyun earned his place after walking out of the Amazon rainforest when his Special Forces team was reported missing and presumed dead. He had survived for 47 days in one of Earth's most hostile environments, living on insects and rainwater while evading both human enemies and the jungle itself. When rescue teams finally found him, he was leading 3 other survivors he had found along the way, keeping them alive through sheer force of will. Ms. Yoon Haiwan had spent her adult life pulling people from mountains when everyone else said they were already dead. She could read weather patterns like other people read books, could find her way through blizzards that blinded satellite navigation systems, and had never lost a person she set out to rescue. Her file contained testimonials from dozens of people who owed their lives to her refusal to accept that anyone was beyond saving. Engineer Bae Sung-min had kept the orbital station New Horizon operational for 2 years beyond its expected failure date. When critical systems began breaking down faster than they could be repaired, he had rebuilt them using parts that were never designed to work together. He had created new solutions to problems that had never existed before, keeping 12 people alive in space through pure engineering stubbornness. As the selection process continued, patterns began to emerge. The chosen representatives were not necessarily the strongest or smartest humans available, but they all shared certain qualities that made them uniquely suited for survival. They adapted quickly to new situations. They refused to panic under pressure, and they possessed an almost irrational determination to keep living even when death seemed certain. Families around the world watched as their loved ones were selected for what might be a one-way journey to the stars. The representatives knew they might never see Earth again, but they also understood that their participation might be the only thing standing between humanity and extinction. The weight of 8 billion lives rested on the shoulders of 10,000 people. President Lim Ji-won addressed the world as the departure date approached. She spoke of courage and sacrifice, of humanity's greatest adventure and their finest representatives. But behind her confident words was the knowledge that she was sending 10,000 people to their probable deaths in the hope that some might survive to secure humanity's future among the stars. The representatives spent their final weeks on Earth in intensive training. They learned everything human science could teach them about surviving in hostile environments, about working together under impossible stress, about maintaining hope when hope seemed foolish. They studied the limited information available about their alien competitors, trying to understand what they would be fighting against on worlds that existed beyond human imagination. Dr. Han Yu-ri found herself appointed as one of the mission's senior scientists, responsible for analyzing whatever alien environments they encountered and finding ways for humans to survive in them. She worked with Bae Sung-min to develop portable equipment that could function in conditions that would destroy conventional technology. Their innovations would have revolutionized life on Earth under normal circumstances, but now they served only as tools for survival in an alien contest. Cho Dae-hyun became one of the mission's tactical leaders, working with Yoon Haiwan to develop strategies for keeping large groups of humans alive in environments that were actively trying to kill them. They created protocols for everything from shelter construction to resource management, to the terrible decisions that would have to be made when not everyone could be saved. The alien transport ship arrived exactly on schedule, appearing in Earth's orbit like a mountain that had learned to fly. It was even larger than the vessel that had brought Nexus Prime, with a hull that seemed to be part machine and part living organism. Docking bays opened like mouths, revealing an interior that glowed with its own light. The 10,000 representatives said goodbye to their families and their world, knowing they carried humanity's hopes with them into the darkness between stars. They were loaded onto shuttles that carried them to the alien transport, each person carrying only what they could wear and the knowledge they had accumulated over their lifetimes. Inside the alien ship, the humans found themselves in an environment that challenged every assumption they had about space travel. The corridors were vast and filled with air that tasted of ozone and unfamiliar flowers. The walls seemed to be alive, pulsing slowly like the inside of some enormous creature. Gravity shifted without warning, and the lighting came from sources that could not be identified or understood. They were not alone on the ship. Representatives from 11 other species had been gathered for the same purpose, and the humans got their first look at what they would be competing against. The Therian collective moved as a single organism, thousands of individual beings that thought and acted as one mind. The mechanical ascendants were machines that had once been organic life, their bodies replaced with technology that could survive in any environment. Other species were harder to understand or categorize. Some existed partially in dimensions that human eyes could not see. Others communicated through methods that bypassed language entirely. A few appeared to be made of energy rather than matter, taking physical form only when necessary. Each species represented the ultimate evolution of survival on their respective worlds. The humans kept to themselves during the journey, partly from caution and partly because communication with most of the other species was impossible without technology they did not possess. They used the travel time to continue their preparations, sharing knowledge and strategies while trying to understand what they would face on the trial worlds. Captain Li Wu-jin monitored their progress from Earth, receiving quantum communication updates that arrived faster than should have been possible using human science. The reports described a journey through space that defied everything humans knew about physics, past stars and nebulae that existed in configurations that should not have been stable according to human understanding of astronomy. As the transport ship approached its destination, the human representatives prepared themselves for whatever was waiting among alien stars. They had trained for 6 months, had said goodbye to everyone they loved, and had accepted that they might not survive what was coming. But they also carried with them something that their alien competitors might not possess: the stubborn human refusal to surrender even when surrender seemed like the only rational choice. The first trial world appeared ahead of them, a planet that looked like it was made of fire and ice locked in eternal war. Dr. Han Yuri looked out at the hostile sphere that would test everything humanity had learned about survival, and wondered if their species was about to prove itself worthy of the stars or demonstrate that some challenges were too great even for human determination to overcome. The first trial world, called Paraxis, hung in space like a nightmare made solid. From orbit, it looked like someone had taken hell and taught it to spin around a dying star. The surface constantly shifted between molten rock and crystalline formations that formed and shattered in endless cycles. Electromagnetic storms raged across continents, creating aurora displays that would have been beautiful if they were not deadly to any technology that tried to function in their presence. Dr. Han Yuri studied the readings from the alien ship's sensors with growing dread. The planet's gravity fluctuated randomly, sometimes pulling with 3 times Earth normal force, other times dropping to nearly 0 without warning. The atmosphere contained compounds that would dissolve most known materials within hours of exposure. Temperatures swung from over 1,000 degrees to absolute 0, and back again in patterns that seemed designed to kill anything that tried to adapt to them. Nexus Prime addressed all the competing species through the ship's communication systems, its crystalline voice somehow reaching directly into their minds regardless of their biology or technology. The rules for the first trial were simple and terrible. Survive on the planet's surface for 1 standard galactic day, which was equivalent to about 37 Earth hours. Teams that lost more than 70% of their members would be eliminated from the competition entirely. The transport ship opened its cargo bays like a predator opening its mouth. Drop pods launched toward the planet's surface, each one carrying representatives from a different species to randomly selected locations across Paraxis. The humans watched through the ship's viewing systems as other species made their descent, some pods exploding on impact, others simply vanishing in the electromagnetic storms that raged through the planet's upper atmosphere. Sergeant Cho Dae-hyun felt his stomach clench as their own drop pods prepared for launch. He had jumped from aircraft into hostile territory many times during his military career, but never toward a planet that was actively trying to kill him before he even landed. The humans had been divided into groups of 50, each pod carrying people with different specialties to maximize their chances of survival. The descent through Pyraxis's atmosphere was like falling through the inside of a storm made of knives. Lightning struck their pods repeatedly, but the alien technology somehow protected them from the worst of the electrical discharge. Through the small windows, they could see the planet's surface rushing up to meet them, a landscape of molten rivers and crystal mountains that changed shape even as they watched. Their pod crashed into what had been solid ground moments before, but was now a field of crystalline spikes that shattered under the impact. The humans tumbled out into an environment that immediately began trying to kill them. The air burned their lungs despite their protective equipment. Gravity pulled them down with crushing force for a few seconds, then suddenly released them so they had to grab onto anything solid to avoid floating away. Mrs. Yoon Hai-wan took charge of the immediate survival situation with the calm efficiency that had made her legendary among mountain rescue teams. She ordered everyone to stay connected by safety lines, to move as a group, and to focus on finding shelter before trying to understand the planet's hostile behavior patterns. Her experience reading Earth's mountain weather served her well in recognizing the signs that preceded Paraxis's rapid environmental changes. Within the first hour, they learned that the planet's surface was not just hostile, but actively malevolent, in ways that seemed to defy the laws of physics. The ground itself appeared to be alive, shifting to create traps and obstacles that targeted any life forms trying to cross it. Crystalline formations would suddenly sprout spikes when someone approached, or collapse into pits filled with molten rock that appeared from nowhere. Engineer Bae Sung-min quickly realized that conventional shelter construction was impossible on a planet where the basic laws of engineering changed without warning. Instead, he began working with the planet's own chaotic systems, using its rapid transformation cycles to create temporary safe spaces. When the ground shifted from crystal to molten rock, he showed the group how to dig quickly into the brief moments when it solidified again. The humans could monitor the progress of other species through communicators that somehow functioned despite the electromagnetic chaos. The Therian collective was struggling badly, their hive mind confusion growing as the planet's random gravity fluctuations separated their individual members beyond their normal communication range. Within the first 6 hours, they had lost over half their representatives to environmental hazards they could not predict or counter. The mechanical ascendants faced different but equally serious problems. Their cybernetic bodies, designed to function in any normal environment, were being systematically destroyed by the planet's electromagnetic fields. Their technological advantages became liabilities when the very systems that kept them alive began failing in ways their designers had never anticipated. They started cannibalizing parts from their fallen members to keep the survivors functional. Dr. Han Yuri made a discovery that probably saved the human mission during their 8th hour on Pyraxis. While studying samples of the planet's atmosphere, she realized that certain bacteria in the human digestive system were not just surviving the toxic compounds, but actually processing them in ways that reduced their harmful effects. Humans who had traveled extensively and been exposed to diverse microorganisms were showing better resistance to the planet's atmospheric toxins. This led to one of the most bizarre survival strategies in human history. The healthiest team members began sharing their gut bacteria with those who were struggling, using methods that would have been considered disgusting under normal circumstances, but were absolutely necessary for survival on an alien world that was trying to poison them from the inside out. Cho De-hyun organized the humans into rotating teams that could respond quickly to the planet's rapid environmental changes. When gravity increased, they dug into the ground and waited it out. When it decreased, they used the opportunity to move quickly across distances that would have been impossible under normal conditions. When the electromagnetic storms intensified, they gathered in formations that used their own bodies to shield their essential equipment. The key to human survival on Paraxis turned out to be their ability to work together under impossible stress. While other species relied on individual superiority or technological advantages, humans used cooperation and adaptability to overcome challenges that defeated more advanced life forms. They shared resources without hesitation, protected their weakest members, and made decisions as a group even when individual survival might have been easier. Yoon Hai-wan developed navigation techniques that used the planet's chaotic magnetic field fluctuations as landmarks rather than obstacles. She taught the others to read the patterns in the electromagnetic storms, to predict when gravity would shift, and to recognize the warning signs that preceded the most dangerous environmental changes. Her mountain rescue experience translated surprisingly well to alien planetary survival. By the 20th hour, the humans had established a functioning base camp in a crystalline formation that Bae Sung-min had modified to provide protection from the worst of the planet's hostility. They had lost members to the hostile environment, good people who had volunteered to represent their species and died on an alien world far from home. But they had also proven that human adaptability and cooperation could overcome challenges that defeated supposedly superior life forms. The final hours of the trial were the most difficult. Pyraxis seemed to sense that the testing period was almost over and increased its hostility accordingly. Gravity fluctuations became more violent, the atmospheric toxins grew more concentrated, and the electromagnetic storms reached intensities that destroyed equipment even when properly shielded. The planet was making one final attempt to kill anything that had dared to survive on its surface. When the alien transport ship finally returned to collect the survivors, the humans had lost 847 people. Each death was a tragedy. A unique human being who would never return to Earth, never see their families again, never contribute to humanity's future among the stars. But their sacrifice had proven something important. Humans could survive on worlds that killed other species, could adapt to conditions that defeated more advanced civilizations. The other competing species had suffered much worse losses. The Therian collective had lost over 6,000 members to the gravity fluctuations that disrupted their hive-mind coordination. The mechanical ascendants saw their numbers reduced by more than 7,000 when their cybernetic systems failed. In the electromagnetic chaos, several other species lost their entire contingents and were eliminated from the competition entirely. As the surviving humans were taken back aboard the alien transport ship, they were changed by what they had experienced. They had seen friends die in ways that no human had ever died before, had survived on a planet that seemed designed specifically to kill anything that tried to live on it, and had proven that their species possessed something that even advanced alien civilizations respected: the ability to survive when survival seemed impossible. The second trial world, Nethros, looked like someone had taken the concept of darkness and given it physical form. From orbit, it appeared as a sphere that absorbed light rather than reflecting it, a hole in space where a planet should have been. No electromagnetic radiation escaped its surface, no heat signature registered on any sensor, and looking at it too long caused a deep psychological unease that the ship's alien medical systems could not explain or treat. Dr. Han Yuri studied what little data was available about Nethros with growing concern. The planet's surface gravity was normal, its atmosphere was breathable by most carbon-based life forms, and its temperature was comfortable by galactic standards. On paper, it should have been the easiest trial world yet. But the psychological evaluation reports from previous tests told a different story, describing complete mental breakdowns among species known for their mental resilience. Nexus Prime explained the nature of the second trial with what might have been satisfaction in its crystalline voice. Nethros was a world of perpetual darkness where reality itself was unstable, where the planet somehow projected the deepest fears and psychological vulnerabilities of visitors directly into their minds. The test was not physical survival but mental endurance, the ability to maintain sanity and functionality when confronted with personalized psychological warfare. The rules were as simple and terrible as before: survive on the planet's surface for one standard galactic day, while maintaining enough psychological coherence to complete basic tasks and respond to emergency situations. Teams that lost more than half their members to complete mental breakdown would be eliminated from the competition. The definition of mental breakdown included catatonia, violent psychosis, and total disconnection from reality. Sergeant Cho Dae-hyun felt a different kind of fear as their drop pods prepared for descent to Nethros. Physical dangers he could fight or adapt to, but the human mind was territory where training and experience might not be enough. He had seen good soldiers break under psychological pressure during his military career, had watched strong people crumble when faced with their deepest fears made manifest. The descent through Nethros's atmosphere was eerily peaceful compared to their arrival on Pyraxis. No storms raged, no electromagnetic interference disrupted their systems, and the landing was smooth and controlled. But as soon as the pod doors opened, the humans felt the planet's influence beginning to work on their minds like a poison that attacked thoughts rather than bodies. The surface of Nethros was covered in a landscape that seemed normal at first glance, but became increasingly disturbing the longer they looked at it. Trees grew in formations that hurt to contemplate, their branches twisted into shapes that suggested meaning without actually conveying any. Buildings stood in the distance, clearly artificial but designed according to architectural principles. that made human minds recoil in instinctive revulsion. Ms. Yunhai Wan tried to establish their base camp using the same systematic approach that had worked on Pyraxis, but found that her usual confidence and competence were being steadily undermined by doubts that seemed to come from outside her own mind. The planet was somehow amplifying every moment of uncertainty she had ever experienced, every time she had questioned her own abilities, or worried that she might fail someone who depended on her. Engineer Bei Sung-min attempted to set up their equipment and establish communication with the other human teams, but discovered that technology functioned differently on Nethros in ways that had nothing to do with physics or engineering. Devices that should have worked perfectly began displaying readouts that made no logical sense, or showing him images of past failures and mistakes that he thought he had forgotten years ago. The planet's psychological attack was not random or general but specifically tailored to each individual's personal vulnerabilities. Han Yuri found herself reliving the months trapped in the Antarctic research station, but this time her colleagues died because of mistakes she might have made, choices she could have made differently, medical knowledge she should have possessed but did not. The guilt and self-doubt grew stronger with each passing hour. Within the first 6 hours on Nethros, reports came in that other species were suffering catastrophic psychological casualties. The Therian collective, already weakened by their losses, on Pyraxis, found their hive mind connection turning against them as the planet amplified negative emotions and transmitted them throughout their shared consciousness. Fear and despair spread through their mental network like a virus, causing mass psychological collapse. The mechanical ascendants discovered that their cybernetic replacements offered no protection against Nethros's influence. The planet somehow reached through their technological modifications to attack whatever organic consciousness remained within their mechanical bodies. Their logical, analytical thought processes became trapped in recursive loops of self-doubt and existential questioning that their original organic programming had never been designed to handle. Cho Dae-hyun recognized the symptoms of psychological warfare from his military training and began implementing countermeasures that he had learned for dealing with enemy attempts at mental manipulation. He organized the humans into buddy teams where each person was responsible for monitoring their partner's mental state and providing reality checks when the planet's influence began to distort their perceptions of events. The humans discovered that their diverse cultural backgrounds and psychological coping mechanisms gave them unexpected advantages on Nethros. Meditation techniques developed by Buddhist monks helped some team members maintain mental clarity when the planet tried to overwhelm them with manufactured fears. Cognitive behavioral therapy methods taught them to recognize and counter the negative thought patterns that Nethros was trying to implant in their minds. Yun Haiwan found that her experience dealing with survivor guilt from mountain rescue operations had prepared her for the kind of psychological pressure that Nethros was applying. She had learned to function effectively while carrying the weight of people she could not save, to make life and death decisions under impossible circumstances without being paralyzed by doubt about whether she was making the right choices. The planet seemed to grow more aggressive as the humans proved resistant to its initial psychological attacks. The manufactured fears became more specific and personal, targeting childhood traumas, relationship failures, and professional disappointments with surgical precision. Some humans began to break under the sustained mental assault, requiring constant supervision from their teammates to prevent them from wandering off into the planet's psychological maze. Bei Sung-min made a crucial discovery during their 15th hour on Nethros when he realized that the planet's psychological attacks were not actually supernatural but were based on sophisticated scanning and analysis of their brain patterns. The alien world was reading their memories and emotional responses, then using that information to construct personalized psychological warfare tailored to each individual's specific vulnerabilities. This understanding allowed the humans to develop more effective countermeasures. They began using techniques borrowed from espionage and resistance training to compartmentalize their thoughts, to hide their most vulnerable memories behind mental barriers, and to recognize when the planet was trying to manipulate their perceptions, versus when they were experiencing genuine thoughts and emotions. Han Yuri organized group therapy sessions, where team members could share their experiences and provide mutual support against the planet's psychological attacks. They discovered that talking about the manufactured fears and doubts reduced their power significantly, that bringing the planet's manipulation tactics into the open made them easier to resist and overcome. The final hours on Nethros were the most challenging as the planet made increasingly desperate attempts to break the human psychological defenses that had proven so effective. The manufactured fears became more intense and realistic, the doubt and guilt more precisely targeted, and the attempts to isolate individuals from their support networks more sophisticated and persistent. When the alien transport ship returned to collect the survivors, the humans had lost over 1,200 people to various forms of psychological breakdown. Some had become catatonic, unable to respond to external stimuli. Others had experienced violent psychotic episodes that required physical restraint to prevent them from harming themselves or their teammates. A few had simply disconnected from reality entirely, retreating into mental worlds where Nethros could not reach them. But the human losses were still smaller than those suffered by the remaining competing species. The Therian collective had lost nearly their entire remaining contingent when their shared consciousness became infected with the psychological contamination that Nethros specialized in spreading. The mechanical ascendants saw their numbers reduced to fewer than 300 survivors when their cybernetic systems proved vulnerable to attacks they had never been designed to resist. Several other alien species were eliminated entirely from the competition during the Nethros trial, their representatives either dead or so psychologically damaged that they could no longer function as coherent individuals. The final trial world, called Designation Null, hung in space like a question mark made of matter and energy. From orbit, it looked like someone had taken the laws of physics and twisted them into something that should not have been able to exist. The planet's surface shifted between different states of reality, sometimes appearing solid, other times existing as patterns of light and probability that hurt to contemplate directly. Dr. Han Yuri studied the sensor readings with a mixture of fascination and horror. According to the ship's instruments, Designation Null existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its physical properties changing based on the beliefs and expectations of whatever life forms were observing it. Time moved differently in various regions of the planet, sometimes faster, sometimes slower, and occasionally in directions that had no names in any language. Of the original 10,000 humans who had left Earth, only 1,847 remained. They were no longer the same people who had volunteered to represent their species among the stars. Months of surviving on worlds that actively tried to kill them had changed them in fundamental ways, making them harder, more adaptable, and more willing to make terrible choices when survival was at stake. Nexus Prime explained the final trial with what sounded like anticipation in its crystalline voice. Designation Null was a world where reality itself was malleable, where the laws of physics responded to will and desperation rather than following consistent rules. The test was not just survival, but the ability to impose their own understanding of reality on a planet that had no fixed nature of its own. Sergeant Cho Dae-hyun listened to the trial rules with the calm acceptance of someone who had already survived impossible challenges and expected to face more. The survivors would be dropped onto Designation Null with minimal equipment and no communication with the transport ship. They would have to find their own way to a designated extraction point while the planet tried to reshape reality around them in ways designed to drive them insane or kill them outright. The few remaining representatives from other species looked like shadows of their former selves. The Therian collective had been reduced to fewer than 200 individuals, whose hive-mind connection had been permanently damaged by their experiences on Nethros. The mechanical ascendants numbered less than 100, their cybernetic bodies patched with improvised repairs that made them look like mechanical scarecrows, rather than advanced technological beings. Yoon Hai-wan took charge of organizing the human descent strategy with the systematic efficiency that had made her legendary in mountain rescue work, but she was no longer the confident professional who had left Earth months ago. Her eyes held the hard knowledge of someone who had seen friends die in alien environments, who had made choices about who lived and who died when not everyone could be saved. The drop pods descended through Designation Null's atmosphere, which seemed to be made of crystallized time rather than normal gases. The humans could see through the pod windows as reality shifted around them during the descent, landscapes transforming from forests to deserts to oceans and back again, without any logical transition between states. Engineer Bae Sung-min felt his understanding of physics crumble as their pod touched down on what appeared to be solid ground, but felt like landing on a memory of firmness rather than actual matter. The planet's surface was not quite real in any conventional sense, existing in a state somewhere between physical matter and conceptual possibility that challenged every assumption he had learned about how the universe worked. The humans emerged from their pods into an environment that defied description. The sky was sometimes blue, sometimes transparent, and occasionally showed views of other planets or star systems that could not have been visible from their actual location. Gravity worked when they expected it to, but failed without warning when they stopped paying attention to it, as if the planet's physics responded to conscious observation rather than following natural laws. Han Yuri attempted to use her scientific training to understand what they were dealing with, but discovered that conventional analysis was useless on a world where the results of experiments changed based on who was conducting them and what they expected to find. The planet seemed to be reading their minds and reshaping itself according to their deepest beliefs about how reality should function. Within the first few hours, they learned that survival on designation null required a completely different approach than anything they had encountered on previous trial worlds. Physical strength and technological adaptation were less important than mental flexibility and the ability to believe in impossible things strongly enough to make them temporarily real. Cho Dae-hyun found that his military training in adaptation and improvisation served him well on a planet where tactical situations could change not just rapidly, but fundamentally, where the terrain itself might decide to stop existing or transform into something completely different without warning. He learned to make plans that could function regardless of what physical laws might be operating at any given moment. Yoon Hae-won discovered that her experience reading mountain weather patterns translated surprisingly well to predicting when designation null would shift between different states of reality. She could sense the approaching changes in the planet's fundamental nature, could feel when the laws of physics were about to reorganize themselves according to new rules that would require different survival strategies. The remaining humans began to work together in ways that went beyond normal cooperation, developing an almost telepathic coordination that allowed them to function as a group even when individual members were experiencing completely different versions of reality. They learned to share their perceptions and beliefs, to vote on what version of physics should apply to their immediate situation. Bae Sung-min made the crucial breakthrough that allowed the humans to not just survive on designation null, but actually thrive there. He realized that the planet responded to engineering problems by providing whatever solutions the engineer believed should exist, regardless of whether those solutions were physically possible according to normal universal laws. He began building structures that should not have worked but did because he refused to believe they could fail. The humans started to reshape parts of designation null itself, imposing their own understanding of how reality should function on a planet that had no fixed nature of its own. They created areas where Earth physics applied, where water flowed downhill and fire provided heat, and solid objects remained solid regardless of who was observing them or what they expected to see. As the trial progressed, it became clear that the humans possessed something that their alien competitors lacked: the ability to maintain their core beliefs about reality while adapting those beliefs to new circumstances. Other species either held too rigidly to their understanding of physics and were destroyed when the planet contradicted their expectations, or adapted too completely and lost their sense of identity in the planet's malleable reality. The final phase of the trial required the survivors to reach an extraction point that existed in a region where time moved backwards and effect preceded cause. Most of the remaining alien representatives were eliminated during this phase, unable to function when the basic sequence of events stopped following logical patterns that their minds could process. But the humans had been changed by their experiences on the previous trial worlds in ways that prepared them for designation null's ultimate challenge. They had learned to make decisions without complete information, to act effectively when normal logic failed, and to maintain their essential humanity even when everything around them stopped making conventional sense. When the alien transport ship finally returned to collect the survivors, Only 1,203 humans remained from the original 10,000 who had left Earth. But they had not just survived the final trial. They had conquered it, reshaping portions of Designation Null according to their own will, and proving that human adaptability extended beyond physical and psychological survival into the realm of fundamental reality manipulation. The other competing species had suffered much worse losses or been eliminated entirely. Humanity had won the competition decisively, earning the title of Ultimate Deathworld and gaining membership in the Galactic Council along with access to technologies that would advance human civilization by thousands of years. Captain Li Wu-jin received the news of humanity's victory from orbit around Earth, but his celebration was tempered by the knowledge of what it had cost. Over 8,000 of Earth's most capable people had died on alien worlds to prove that humans could survive anything the galaxy could devise. The price of victory seemed almost too high to justify the rewards they had earned. Ambassador Kang So-ra was summoned to meet with representatives of the Galactic Council, where she learned the true purpose behind the trials that had cost so many human lives. The galaxy needed enforcers, species capable of surviving in the most hostile environments to carry out missions that other civilizations could not complete. Humanity had proven themselves to be the perfect candidates for this role. The Galactic Council welcomed humanity not as equals but as the galaxy's newest weapon,